Hey y'all, welcome back to Flick Connection. Today's episode, I'm telling you about 10 increasingly messed up movies currently free to watch right here on YouTube. In fact, if you check the top pinned comment, not only will you find the full list like usual, but I put links down there so you can start watching these movies right away, again, for free on YouTube. Now, like I said, these movies get increasingly twisted, leading all the way up to my number one pick, which is a highly underrated John Carpenter flick that's actually about Stephen King books coming to life. But we'll start this list with a lighthearted, blood-soaked pick with Dracula, Dead and Loving It.
Oh my God!
Now, I will admit this is not a great movie, but if you typically like Leslie Nielsen flicks, then this is a funny one. Not only is he funny as Dracula, but Mel Brooks is in this one playing Van Helsing. Like I said, there's multiple blood-soaked gags in this one that are absolutely hilarious. And while, of course, the story of Dracula is a twisted one, it earns a spot here on the list, this movie is a PG-13 comedy. And even though it's not as good as Mel Brooks' best or Leslie Nielsen's best, they're both very funny in it, and it's cool to see them do a Dracula movie together. You've also got Peter MacNicol doing Renfield in, like, the funniest rendition of Renfield I could imagine.
I tell you, I saw you snatch a spider right out of the air and eat it.
A spider? How absurd.
In fact, the only reason I watched this movie recently is because I liked the new Nosferatu so much, I wanted to revisit some of my favorite Dracula movies, and, you know, this is one of them.
She's almost dead.
But on a more serious note, we'll go with a gangster flick that does have a hard edge to it, but just it's not nearly as rough as some of the picks near the number one spot on this list. In fact, Layer Cake is a pretty glossy movie. Now, it does have quite a bit of gangster violence in there, but, you know, where Guy Ritchie gangster movies are typically pretty tough and gritty, Layer Cake features this, like, upper-class layer of criminal. In fact, Daniel Craig did this movie before he became James Bond, and I don't have any doubts that this movie is why he was cast as Bond. It's a super slick flick about a high-end drug dealer. It's got some surprising twists and turns, a killer soundtrack, and as I mentioned, Guy Ritchie, this is the first feature film from director Matthew Vaughn, who produced Guy Ritchie's first few movies. And Matthew Vaughn went on to do some great movies like Kick-Ass, X-Men First Class, The Kingsman. I still think Layer Cake is his best work. Now, I mentioned there's a Stephen King inspired movie at my number one spot, but my next pick is based on a book by Dean Koontz. It's titled Odd Thomas, and it stars Anton Yelchin in one of his final roles, unfortunately. But it's a good one. He plays a clairvoyant short order cook in this movie who has the ability to see things in like another realm. A dark realm with these weird creatures. It's got a cool vibe to it and a bit of humor. And it is a fairly low budget movie that's well over 10 years old now. You can see that on some of the effects, but the story and really the delivery with Anton Yelchin and some of the humor mixed in is good enough that this movie's actually got fairly high ratings despite its low budget qualities. Now, it is worth noting that I ordered this list differently than I normally do. Normally, I'll list them and how strong I recommend them, and even though my number one pick on this list is the darkest and my favorite movie on this list, they're not in the order that I normally recommend them in. They just get increasingly more twisted. I say that because my next pick, Paprika, would definitely be near the top of this list, but it is not nearly as dark and twisted as some of the other movies coming up. However, this movie clearly inspired most of Christopher Nolan's Inception. In fact, there are shots in Inception that were essentially lifted directly from Paprika. And it's a very similar setup. Paprika revolves around a device that allows therapists to enter people's dreams, and when that device gets stolen, all hell breaks loose, and the main character, Paprika, has to stop it. But what you get are people going in and out of dream sequences. You don't always necessarily know if you're in a dream, but the way that the dreams are animated in this movie is absolutely breathtaking, making Paprika one of those movies that I recommend Even for people who have never seen an anime flick before, this is one that would make a great first watch, especially if you're not allergic to subtitles. It's a Japanese flick, but it's got an hour and 30-minute runtime, and I'm telling you, if you're a big fan of Inception like I am, Paprika is a must-watch. And then at the end of the video, I'll show you actually how to find all the free movies on YouTube because the catalog changes from month to month. Before that, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, Magic Spoon, which has turned into my late-night snack of choice for years now. And that's because Magic Spoon is a delicious, high-protein treat that tastes just like cereals you remember from when you were a kid. But each bowl of Magic Spoon is keto-friendly with 4 to 5 net grams of carbs per serving, but a whopping 13 to 14 grams of protein and 0 grams of sugar, and at only 140 calories per bowl. Magic Spoon is a guilt-free, sweet late-night treat that also helps me pack on those extra grams of protein, which is important at my age, you know, if you're wanting to maintain muscles. Magic Spoon is also gluten-free, grain-free, and soy-free, making it super easy to incorporate into any diet. But if you also don't want the dairy, Magic Spoon now comes in these treats that are very familiar. I mean, they've got some delicious options available on top of the cereal, but their newest product, the granola, is the most delicious thing they have released. My wife agrees. In fact, this bag is empty because of her. I mean, if you're already incorporating granola into your diet, this is a fantastic high protein option. And my viewers can save $5 off their first order with Magic Spoon when they go to this link or just use this QR code. If you're not sure what to get, I recommend getting a variety pack. But again, with the cereal, the treats, and the granola, it's hard to go wrong. Again, just follow one of these links, save $5. It's a great deal on a product that I love and enjoy every single week. But speaking of things I enjoy, let's get back to these flicks.
Everybody hold still.
People die at the fair.
People die at the fair.
I recently rewatched A Million Ways to Die in the West, and while it doesn't really hold up as a solid comedy, well worth rewatching, it is full of laughs. If you didn't know, this is from writer-director Seth MacFarlane, the guy who created Family Guy, and unlike Ted, A Million Ways to Die in the West is almost like a live-action episode of Family Guy. Yes, it's in the West, there's no Family Guy characters, but the jokes, the way they're set up, is very much like Family Guy. They're all out of context. They're all quite funny, but the story is not glued together very well here at all. It is still a very funny showcase of jokes and sketches that are pretty raunchy and twisted at the same time, which, you know, earns it that spot on this list. But my next one is an underrated thriller that takes place on the Texas-Mexico border, and this has got some rough elements in it. It's titled The Hollow Point.
Spit that out. Spit that
Not only does it have some rough elements, but you've got some rough and tumble characters in this movie, played by Ian McShane. John Leguizamo is essentially the villain in this movie. He's fantastic. I'm surprised he doesn't do more stuff like that. Jim Belushi even has a surprising role in this as well. He's fantastic, and Patrick Wilson plays the lead. He is great in this movie. It's essentially a modern-day Western, but as you would expect a modern-day Western to have, it's got a harder edge to it, and the violence is not pervasive. It's not like this movie's gonna gross you out or anything, but there are some nasty criminals up to some nasty business on this border, mostly having to deal with the smuggling of hollow point ammunition. But if you dig Westerns or even modern day Westerns like No Country for Old Men, the Hollow Point is a highly underrated one. Now, my next pick was just added back to Netflix, and it is a movie I have recommended here on Flick Connection maybe more than anything else, if not more times. I've recommended Train to Busan more strongly than almost anything else here on the channel. Mainly because a few years ago when it came out, not only was it one of the best zombie movies I had ever seen, it was also highly underrated here in the US. It has since grown a following, and now not only can you check this movie out on Netflix if you don't want to watch the YouTube ads, they also have the sequel titled Peninsula over there on Netflix. But if you don't mess with Netflix anymore, you can check out Train to Busan for free right here on YouTube. And again, one of the best zombie movies I've ever seen, which I'm aware is a very bold statement, but the story here is so compelling. All of the stuff on the train is amazing, and I'll say, this is a movie I've not only recommended strongly with a very good response here on the channel, but I've showed this movie to friends and family over the years, and everyone I've watched this movie with has told me how much they liked it the next day or sometime after, which is not always the case. So you've got some ringing endorsements for Train to Busan. I will say, if you're just peripherally interested in zombie flicks and you've never seen this one, you will have to read subtitles, but Train to Busan is so worth it. Next up, I've got my number 3 pick. Then I'm gonna give you those honorable mentions, and I'm gonna show you how to actually find the free movies on YouTube. But my number 3 pick is the most well-known movie on this list. It's not a hidden gem or an underrated flick. It's a classic horror flick from director Brian De Palma, Carrie.
Starring Sissy Spacek, Piper Laurie, and introducing John Travolta in his first motion picture role.
Now, Carrie is not one of my favorite movies in this genre, but if it has been a while since you've watched it, this is an incredibly well-directed horror movie. In fact, in the horror genre, there are a lot of movies like Carrie that are very poorly directed, but Carrie nails it. Brian De Palma brings all the themes to life. I mean, Carrie's got a very slow pace. I mean, you're really waiting for that kind of powder keg of an ending. He makes it work all the way through, making it truly like one of the better Stephen King adaptations really ever created. But certainly back at this time, you've got The Shining and you've got Carrie, and Carrie is maybe more successful at being more faithful to the source material. Now, in order to find the free movies on YouTube, all you want to do in the search bar on YouTube is type in Primetime Movies. If you type in free movies, you're going to get stuff that people have uploaded illegally, which means it's going to be cropped, it's going to be grainy. What I'm directing you to with Primetime Movies are official movies YouTube has listed. They're free. It's a rotating catalog, kind of like Tubi or Freevee. If you don't have YouTube Premium, obviously they're gonna have ad breaks in them. And some people have told me that some of the titles on YouTube are typically like made for TV, or rather edited for TV, meaning like if you watch Goodfellas, it's gonna sound like this.
That's my aunt, you motherfather.
I have not run into that personally, but I do see occasionally they'll have like a PG-13 or a TV-14 rating on an R-rated movie. So be on the lookout for that. But Primetime Movies takes you to all of their official movies. Many of these are to rent or purchase, again, right here on YouTube. But if you scroll down, you will see a list of free ones, and all you want to do is click View All, and there you go. You've got a full list. You can click on any of these. Now, all of the ones I'm talking about here may not even be available on YouTube anymore if you're watching this video in the future, or if you're watching it in another country. So again, type in Primetime Movies in the search bar, look for the list of free movies, click on View All. You're gonna see all the movies available in your country at this time. But right now in the US, some other movies I recommend include Midnight Special. This is a great little sci-fi flick starring Michael Shannon. He's essentially kidnapped his young son and they're running away across the country, and the boy has some sort of supernatural powers and he's trying to protect him from a cult. It's very interesting stuff presented in a grounded, realistic way. It's a fantastic flick. Hundreds of Beavers is one that has gotten a lot of attention over the last year. I have seen it. It's a wild one. Imagine a silent film with like a Looney Tunes kind of vibe, but there's all sorts of little low-budget gags in this movie that are really funny, and the movie's got a PG rating, making it pretty accessible. I do think it'd be hard to get kids to sit still for this movie, but if you're interested in it, it's a riot. Put it on for 15 minutes and see if it can hook you. And they've got Leon the Professional, along with a whole slew of other fantastic movies. In fact, I did a list of YouTube movies I recommend last month, and a lot of those titles are still available here on YouTube. Next up, I've got a Clive Barker classic that is my favorite movie of his, mainly because of how diverse all of the fantasy ideas are in Nightbreed.
Clive Barker, creator of Hellraiser, brings you a reason to really be afraid of the dark. Nightbreed.
Now, this is a fantasy horror movie that goes to depths most movies in this genre don't even mess with. They might allude to this other realm. In Nightbreed, you go into the depths of this dark realm, and not only do you visit it, but you interact with all the different characters there. There are so many wild, and I mean truly wild, costume designs in Nightbreed. It's mind-blowing that they fit all this into a movie that actually is coherent and makes sense. On top of all that, all those elements working together well, it's also an interesting story, and it's got a killer 80s vibe to it too, with the music, and just everything about this movie is so slick and cool and of its time. If you dig this stuff with the practical effects and the costumes and everything, Nightbreed is a masterpiece. But my number one pick comes from legendary director John Carpenter, who has done some of my favorite films. You've got Halloween, Escape from New York, The Thing, all amazing movies, but one that just got, I think, criminally overlooked in his filmography is In the Mouth of Madness.
You can forget about Stephen King. Kane outsells them all.
Now, this movie revolves around a series of books written by a man named Sutter Kane. He's got the same initials as Stephen King. In fact, the covers of all of his books reveal a map to a location. Sam Neill plays an insurance investigator in this movie, which is not very important, but he goes to investigate, try to find Sutter Kane, and discovers some really dark mysteries. In fact, this movie almost has like a Christopher Nolan level of mystery to it, with twists and turns, yet a very dark sort of H.P. Lovecraft underbelly, or at least that's where you're headed. So while this has nothing to do with Stephen King, it is definitely a take on his work, and the movie's filled with very little visual effects, but some simple special effects that just kind of make you do a double take. And it's because Sam Neill's character is descending into the mouth of madness in this movie, and it is so effective. This is one I love watching at Halloween time, and I don't see it available on streaming very often. I'm honestly surprised to see it included for free on YouTube right now. Do not forget to go check that top pinned comment in order to find those links, or go check out the Magic Spoon link if you want to save $5 off your first order. But I will keep making these videos as long as y'all keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this special YouTube list, and you will see me on the next one.